a warm welcome to first the speakers and as well to the participants to this very special first session in a series where we'll be debating the digital transformation of higher education, but not only today, but over the weeks to come. As education is transforming rapidly and already in normal times, we see that it is transforming even faster, more so today. Technology has a huge impact on the education sector and in particular on higher education around the world. There are new opportunities, there is opportunities for increased use, but there are many challenges as well when it comes to access to this use and the maximization opportunities for using technology for the better of society through education. As you may have read, IAU aims to advocate for equity and solidarity in matters of digital education, to promote the design of inclusive digital transformation strategies. And that's where our work meets the same endeavors as UOC. And we're very, very pleased today to open what will be a very nice series of debates on this transformation that we see and where it can lead. The future of higher education will be debated in 6 chapters, which will be accompanied by 6 debates to be followed just a few days after each chapter explores the different levels of transformation of higher education that is accelerated by the pandemic. Today it's chapter 1, the return to campus, making sense of innovative hybrid teaching and learning. And I would like to invite our esteemed hosts, representatives, Pam Fredman, the president of the IAU, and Josep Planel, the president of UOC, to open this series. And I will first give the floor to you, Professor Planel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending on the place you are. I would like to welcome all of you to this session, which means the opening of this series between IAU and UOC on innovative education for unshaped futures. Let me start by telling you that the UOC UOC from now on is a native digital university. We are a driving agent for social transformation. We pioneered and we are expert and leading reference in e-learning. And the mission of the university is to provide or to guarantee long life learning at public access, adapting to the vital and professional moment of citizens. And we focus our research and innovation on the interaction between technology and social sciences. The work was related from the beginning with technology. And the vision was to, in 1995, to bet for internet. And internet allowed very effective communication between students and the university. And in fact, the founders of the university asked them the right question, which is, how can technology enable us to do what we were up to now unable to do by other means? And this led to our learning model, which puts the student in the center of the action, and the student learns by doing. And this is the main singularity of our university, which we say is a distance-less university, because the university is where the student is and where the professor is. In this sense, then technology is necessary, but it's not enough. And that has given us as well internet, since internet is ubiquitous, we have the possibility to have the ambition to be global. Another important aspect is the quality of online learning and the SDG 4 from the 2030 agenda. In this sense, we are compromised with quality of online learning, because we we can increase in this way the reach of higher education in all types of students and countries, and broaden the diversity of their profiles, and in this sense guaranteeing equal access to higher education. The COVID has produced a strong effect on higher education in general terms, but technology has been of great use because it has allowed to become virtual to most universities. But it's not just, as I said before, technology which is relevant. It's how technology combines with all the aspects that that education, our distance education requires. And in this sense, I would like to quote Sanjay Sharma, Vice President on Open Learning at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which in the inaugural lecture last October, he was saying, universities are at crisis right now. When we come back from COVID, I hope we don't stare at each other and say, my God, we could have done this over Zoom. We have to make that the classroom counts. I hope that universities will become places of action, creation, and impact. And now let me go to how we organize this series. In the first place, I would like to mention that our commitment with open knowledge has made that UOC started sharing last year and our experience in online education with Spanish-speaking educational community. And now this series, what we do is to start the aim to explore the changes currently observed in higher education in a wider prospect. And in fact, both institutions, we have noticed that uncertainty and the need for resilience to be able to react to the rapid changes in the environment, which are the constants after COVID-19. And the reason of this collaboration with IAU, well, IAU is the global association that unites universities from around the globe, from very different countries and contexts. All of them have been affected differently by the pandemic and encountered themselves in different situations regarding digitalization. Moreover, IAU acts as the global voice in HAE in UNESCO and other multilateral organizations. For the UOC, the IAU is therefore the perfect partner to team up in order to set up this series and share our experience as a digital university and debate with institutions from around the world on the future of higher education. But this collaboration isn't new. Since 2018, UOC and IAU have collaborated closely in a wide variety of joint activities, mainly in the area of digitalization of higher education and the Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. Finally, let me acknowledge the teams of IAU and UOC for making this series possible. And especially, let me mention Pam Fredman, Hilji Van Land, Trine Jensen, Albert Sangrà, Nadja Gell, Andrea Tavernero, and Virginia Sanchez. Thank you very much to all participants, and I wish you a very good series of conferences and talks. Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. So on behalf of IAU, I really want to express my thanks to UOC for great commitments and also for all the work we have done together, as you have already expressed. And specifically, I want to mention the partnering in accomplishing this webinar series on innovative education for unshaped futures. The purpose of the series is really to debate some of the challenges and changes in higher education imposed by the ongoing pandemic. And that will, of course, have an impact beyond the state of the pandemic, and we will see an unpredictable and unshaped future. It should be noted that in many higher education institutions, digitalization was already ongoing before COVID-19, and they were fully online, like UOC. However, we all experienced that the physical distancing to avoid spreading of the virus accelerated the transformation, and there are already many lessons to be learned. According to the global survey of IAU, the effect of COVID-19 on higher education, which affected almost all higher education institutions in different ways, but we have also a lot of similarities. But there are, as already expressed, institutional, national, and regional diversity. Diversity often related to cultural, to social and economic differences, and those must be taken into account and respected to take global responsibility for the future of higher education. There are also signals that the consequences of COVID-19 might result in increased inequality. And I would particularly highlight the inequality and the risk of more inequality when it comes to the gender aspects. And I think that I will bring that forward to be taken into account when we discuss the future. So this series, starting today, comprises, as already said, 6 sessions, and the aim is to bring awareness and of challenges to be met, and also that we can share experience and ideas, and hopefully together forming the innovative education for unshaped futures. The speakers will be from campus-based and online universities like UOC, and to bring different views and experience and perspectives of changes and challenges to be met. So regardless of the modes of learning, our ambition is though the same: to offer high quality education to learners at all levels, including the lifelong learners. High quality education that will equip our learners with disciplinary knowledge, but also the academic skills to meet societal needs of competence for a sustainable future. So finally, I will highlight that each of the sessions in this series are followed by a policy dialogue, where participants of the sessions are invited to debate and share experience and ideas. And of course, your participation and inputs are of great value for the outcomes in the report that will be submitted as a contribution to the UNESCO World Higher Education Conference in 2022. And also, as you already expressed, I would like to thank everyone who has realized this series and promoting cooperation to develop innovative education for the unshaped future. So welcome everyone to this series of seminars, and I hope it will be very good, and it's up to us to contribute as much as possible. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much, José Planel, President of UOC, and Pam Fredman, President of the IAU. And as Secretary General, I'm very pleased to then declare the series open. Let's be official. And to thank all those who have been participating in shaping this wonderful series. And I'm now giving the floor to Trine Jensen, the Manager of Digital Transformation of Higher Education at the IAU, who orchestrated this with the UOC team and who will moderate and coordinate this session, and to the esteemed speakers from Australia and from Spain. So the floor is yours, Trine, and wonderful. We look forward to all these 6 chapters and debates, and hope everybody will come back from one chapter to the next. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Pam and Joseph, for being with us and launching this series that we have been creating together with Albert. We're very excited about it, so we are pleased to start here with Chapter 1, Return to Campus, Making Sense of Hybrid Teaching and Learning. We found that this would be an important topic right now. when we look at the situation today, it is very different from one country to another, to what extent students are returning to campus. And what is clear is that within the past year, I think that all universities around the world have not been able to just go by business as usual. It has really been a year that has turned everything upside down, where we have had to find new solutions in order to ensure that to minimize the disruptions of academia. But discussing this series, we agreed that it is a good point in time to start drawing some lessons learned, because so far the pivoting and the use of digital technologies have been forced. It has been unplanned. But right now we're at a moment in time where we are getting accustomed to be in a situation where we cannot plan very far ahead, where we have to be flexible and take day by day and see what is possible. But we think it's a good moment in time to start discussing what changes will come out of this pandemic. What do we learn? What can we bring forward in our common pursuit in terms of aiming for quality higher education? So we are very pleased to have this topic on the table. What does it mean now to return to campus? What are the innovations that are ahead of us, or what is already being implemented? And to discuss that, I'm very pleased to introduce to you our two excellent speakers. We have Albert Sangrà, professor in the Faculty of Psychology and Educational Sciences at the Open University of Catalonia. He's also the director of the UNESCO Chair in Education and Technology for Social Change at UOC. And then, as I already mentioned, last but not least, he is part of the co-creation of this series. So it is my great pleasure that he is on the panel here today. And together with him, we have also Liz Johnson, who is the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Education at Deakin University in Australia. So Liz, thank you so much for being with us here. I know that it's very late on your side, but we're very pleased that you accepted to be here on this time in order to allow us to open up to as many regions as the world, because even though technology brings down some walls, we still have some time zones to deal with. So we are very pleased to have you here. Liz is in charge at the University of Curriculum Reform and the management of student learning experiences, and is also very involved in futures, learning futures at the university. And we are particularly pleased to have you with us because Deakin University was a university that was already very ahead in terms of blended learning before the pandemic. But as we discussed already, I think that all universities around the world are learning as we go, and everyone, even UOC, which is a fully online university, also have different lessons learned to share from this experience. So Liz, I would like to turn the floor to you, and we are very pleased to hear your thoughts about how to make sense of the return to campus.
Thank you, Trina. It is a great pleasure to join colleagues today from the other side of the world. It is indeed the evening here, not quite as late as you might think, Trina. And on a wet, windy day in southern Australia, it's a pleasure to look across to, I hope, what is a lovely day in Europe. I'm going to talk to you about Deakin University's approach to blended learning. I will comment on the pandemic as we go through, but I'm not going to dwell on it because I see it as an acceleration, as has been said before, of trends that were already there. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen because, of course, we have pictures to share, which are the joy of using PowerPoint. So Deakin University started its existence 45 years ago as what I would call a multimodal institution. We had both on-campus learners and learners who are joining us remotely, in the beginning by distance and now digitally. So we have been in this place of working across digital and face-to-face environments. Currently at Deakin, we've got over 65,000 course enrolments at the moment, spread across undergraduate and postgraduate enrolments, of course, and about somewhere between 75 and 80% of those students are Australian, domestic students in Australia, and about 20 to 25% of those are international. That percentage at the moment is falling quickly as the Australian borders are closed and we can't welcome any new international students onshore in Australia at the moment. However, what that means for us is that we've got a mix of students which has coloured the way we've developed courses and teaching. About 70% of our students enrol in an on-campus course, what's designated an on-campus course, and about 30% of them choose a course that is offered online, or as we call it, in the cloud. I keep telling my staff that all our students are actually cloud learners, just some more than others, because that 70% that study on campus are still using digital affordances to facilitate their study. In this talk, I want to bring through 4 principles that we're using to rebuild our curriculum after the disruption of 2020. As I said, we were on this journey anyway, and that 2020 experience has really accelerated it. And I'll go through these ideas one by one. But first of all, this idea that we were there already can be seen in the uptake of online education. On the left there, I've got a graph which comes from the aggregator Class Central in the States, and it shows the steady rise of massive open online courses. On the right, I've got some data from Australia, and this is the number of domestic students, not international students, but domestic students studying, as the government terms it, off campus. The top line are the students that choose entirely online courses, and you can see the acceleration from after a dip in 2001, accelerated from about 2007 onwards. The bottom line is labelled multimodal. They're students who are choosing a mixture of on-campus and online study, and you'll see the acceleration is even faster then. But the point I really want to make is this graph runs, as you see along the x-axis at the bottom, to 2016. This trend towards digital delivery and blended delivery was already present and then accelerated by the pandemic. And we know, because we're a multimodal institution, that students have different needs and different characteristics which play into their choice about what kind of study they're going to enrol in. So on the left, I've got some characteristics of our cloud cohort, those 30% of students who choose an online course, compared to the students that choose an on-campus experience to go with that. And you will see in red on the left that our online students are much more likely to be part-time. They're much more likely to be older and with carer responsibilities, and they're more likely to live in a regional or remote location. By contrast, our on-campus students are more likely to be undergraduate rather than postgraduate, and our international students, when they come onshore, come to seek an on-campus experience. So these two cohorts have different needs and different objectives in their study. Our online students are often choosing that mode because they're seeking flexibility. They're looking for a student experience and student teaching and learning which can fit into busy lives. That's why they choose part-time study, and many of them are coming back to study after a career or family break. So we need to provide resources that will support that online delivery, and I'm sure Albert is going to tell us a lot more about how UOC does this. But we're doing this in 2 modes at once. So we have a learning management system that supports both our online learners and our on-campus learners. We have a library which has physical locations, but the vast majority of the collection is digital and is accessed digitally. Our timetables offer both synchronous and asynchronous sites, and this is typical actually of all sorts of learning. It doesn't matter what mode you're in. The question is, when do you, how do you interact with your learners? And both cohorts use group and independent study. We use a trimester system for all our learners, and we're looking at how we can stack their learning over the long time to build lifelong learning journeys, as our online learners tell us again and again as they return to study that that's really important. So our first idea that I remind my staff about all the time is that blended and digital learning is increasing participation because it allows flexibility. It allows learners who can't take the time out to attend a campus to participate in higher education. And digital delivery increases that flexibility and removes geographic and time constraints. How do we design learning? Well, there's some things about learning which are true of all learning modes, and I've pulled out some principles here from the general literature. These are not new ideas. They've been around for a very long time. All learning is most effective when it's active, constructively aligned, whether you call it backwards designs or constructive alignment, when it's engaging and relevant, and when it's intentionally designed and evidence-based. That is true of all good learning. And the aim of that is to build desired competencies and skills evidenced by effective assessment, to build evaluative judgment so learners can make their own judgments of their progress and the merit of their work and others. And it builds capability learning skills for independent lifelong learning. Now, that's true whatever mode you study in. And here I've brought out a comparison that was quite old now, several decades old, looking at the different affordances of online versus digital. And the way this was characterised by Moore and colleagues was to categorise learning activities in terms of relationships, either between a learner and instructor, a learner and the content they're working with, or between learners, peer learning. And in each case, this mode can either be face-to-face or digital, and frequently it's a mix of both. The mode does not disrupt the need for all these kinds of relationships. It merely changes the nature of it. So what we would say is that the principles of good learning are universal and that they should guide learning design in every mode of learning. The fourth idea is actually about the nuts and bolts of learning design. And it's to point out that blended learning is actually a spectrum. It goes all the way from entirely on-campus activities to entirely online activities. And it is rare now to have a course that is offered online without any digital support. In fact, I certainly don't have one at my university, and I suggest it would be hard to find at all. So there's a whole spectrum of course design here, depending on the mix of on-campus and online learning that you choose. And that mix should reflect the characteristics of your learner cohort and what your course is trying to achieve. And when we think about that, my exhortation to my staff is to choose the learning mode which will best support learners to achieve the learning outcomes that you intend. So on the left there, if we think about what is digital really good for, there's a number of things which we do online which we would not consider doing in any other way. If we're doing data analysis, we wouldn't consider doing it with graph paper anymore. We expect to be online. That's the authentic place to do that kind of work. But online is also really good in terms of provision of resources. So it's really good for foundations where you want to provide opportunities for students to repeat until they achieve mastery, for them to self-test at their own pace and to build their confidence. It's particularly good for exploration. If we want new information, our first port of call is usually an internet browser, whether it's into the academic literature or whether it's into the sea of information which is now available at people's fingertips. So of course, it's entirely appropriate that our students use it in the same way. And digital delivery also allows us to structure thinking processes using project management tools or ideation tools which store and share thinking patterns and thinking modes between groups over a longer time. But there are times where you want to be in the same place as your learners and you want them in a specific place. So you might want them to experience a particular environment for observation or data collection. You might need them to work with specialised equipment, which you can't always simulate online. Obviously you can. We don't send pilots up in airplanes until they've had considerable experience with flight simulators. But in the end, we want them to be able to be in an aeroplane and experience that. And being together offers different sorts of collaboration. And the mix that you choose between these sets of activities is really determined, or should be, by the learning outcomes you are seeking, the discipline that you are working with, and what is authentic practice in that area. So the third idea is to choose the mode of learning that best supports the learning outcome intended. And I've said could be, but for us, it's almost always a mix of online and on campus, unless we are offering a completely online course, in which case we make sure that it can deliver the learning outcomes intended. The fourth point I want to make is about the nature of the world around us. What we have seen during 2020 and since is an acceleration of a digital world of work, a digital world of life, a digital world of interaction. It's very clear now, certainly in Australia and I think globally, that there will be a great deal more of people using blended working modes, spending some of their time working from home and some of their time in a face-to-face interaction with co-workers. That is now the norm. So it is entirely appropriate that students experience that norm through their study. And to do that, they will need skills for a digitally enabled, artificially intelligence-enabled world. They will need to understand what a digital world is all about, and they will need to understand what their contribution in it looks like. This analysis, this comparison of machines and humans comes from a colleague at Deakin, Margaret Bierman, who talks about the different affordances of those kinds of intelligence coming together, that machines are good at following rules, classifying, predicting, informing, whereas humans have to set the rules that machines use. They need to provide the rationales and speculate and interpret. And bearing in mind that artificial intelligence is going ahead by leaps and bounds, this is still a partnership, and it's one in which our learners need to participate. And so they need to move beyond being digital, being other, to it being a native experience, whether you do that by becoming a digital citizen or a digital worker, or by changing your point of view so that digital becomes part of your identity as well as your practices. So we need to use blended study and digital study because we need to choose the mode of learning that best reflects authentic professional practice. Digital work and life has been accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic, and the clock will not turn back. So we need to make sure that the way we help our students prepare for their life and career or return to lifelong study is a reflection of the world around them. So just to recap, 4 ideas which we're using in our work in developing blended curriculum. Digital increases access and participation. Good learning principles always apply. We need to combine the modes to get the best outcomes from our learners, and to remember that digital is authentic to work and life, as is face-to-face experience. And I'll pause there, Trina. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Liz, for sharing this experience and for reminding us, of course, that we have to think about the modes of learning that are the most relevant in terms of the learning outcomes, in terms of the type of disciplines that we have, as well as the spectrum. I like that slide where you show that it is combined of many different types of interaction. So thank you very much. I will turn to Albert now, who is from UOC, is going to share a bit of his thoughts, of course, coming from an online university perspective, but also reflecting a bit on what the impact on face-to-face. So Albert, I give you the floor.
So thank you very much, Trina, and I would like to start by saying thank you to you particularly for the good job we've done organizing everything at that stage, and it's been a pleasure for me, and it's also a pleasure for me to share the stage with Liz Johnson, because I really celebrate to be able to work together in some extent with Deakin University, because I think that they are doing things very well, and she has shown a very important approach to what blended learning should be, because during this pandemic, a lot of people have found out what blended could be, but the application of this has been without the most important principles that Liz have shared with us at this particular presentation. So thank you very much. I'm going to start in order not to waste any part of the time we have, and I'm going to share my screen with my slides, a few of them. Okay. So are you seeing the presentation? Could you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so I gave a title to the presentation that for me, the most important sentence is glancing the normal from a different perspective. And I will be back on that at almost the end of the presentation in order to say what I would like to mean when saying that. So first of all, my first idea is that learning is changing. Of course, this is not a scoop. So we know that learning is changing, not now, it's changing from some time before, but we know that even in 2011, there was a very interesting work from Redeker and other people, other colleagues, talking about the pillars of the future of learning, in which they pointed out on some elements that will be the most important ones in order to have a future approach to learning. And there were flexibility, personalization, interaction, and collaboration as the main ones, but also informalization as an element that more and more is appearing in the way that people are learning because of the digitalization of the world, the society, not only the institutions, but also the society in which we can contact each other very easily. So all these elements should be taken into consideration when we are talking about how the education, how the learning of the future will be, or in some extent, it's being now. So on the other hand, we know that learning is also hybrid because the world is hybrid at this moment. So we know that the cars are hybrid. We know that the power is hybrid too, and that we can mobilize and combine the different power sources in order to respect also the climate crisis and so on. But we can also see that even the nature is also hybrid, and we can see some animals that in fact in nature they are also hybrid, as you can see here. So it is perfectly logical that also education can be and has to be hybrid. And this doesn't mean that I'm talking from an online institution or someone else is talking from a face-to-face institution. At the end, the way that people are learning is in a hybrid way. And this has to be taken into consideration. And a pandemic arrived. And at that moment, I used to use this sentence from a Uruguayan poet, Mario Benedetti, who said, I have translated into English this sentence, is when we thought we had all the answers, suddenly all the questions were changed. And I think that this is the perception, the feeling, the things we felt when at the beginning of the pandemic, it will depend on the country we are, at the beginning of the lockdown of everything we felt. So we were experienced, we knew how to manage our particular professions and jobs, and suddenly everything changed. So this change has been approached in very different ways. And I think that in general, we did our best on that. But it's important to take into consideration that learning was changing even before. So analyzing what the literature says about this metamorphosis of learning, we can identify at least 4 catalysts for this change, for this metamorphosis. The first one is the connected networks that enable connected learning. The other one is the empowerment of learners, more learners that are more and more empowered to do things, to learn by their own. The third is the overcoming of time and space barriers. And the fourth one is the acceptance of the existence of an unconscious, informal, invisible, and silent learning that we have identified when I mentioned this idea of informalization of learning too. So these 4 catalysts were changing the way in people are learning. But we should add a new one, the discontinuity or intermittence generated by the situation of the pandemic. So as it has been said, with the pandemic, all these changes have sped up. And this is very important because it's not because we have found out the things now, it's because most of these things were already before. But now we can see them because they are critically or dramatically perceived by our eyes in this particular moment. So we have some provisory lessons from the pandemic. I think that the most important lessons will come later, but some of them are that maybe in different forms, this could happen again, and we have to avoid the interruption of education. This is the most important thing. So we were almost interrupting, in some cases, the education of a lot of people. In that case, we did our best, but we have to accept that some things can be done much better. It doesn't mean that we did not well, but it could be done much better. Another lesson is that digital growth has resulted in the only feasible solution. If we didn't have at that particular moment online options, the interruption of education probably would have been complete. So this is something to take into consideration and to think about it. So online has led us to go on by a kind of education. Maybe some people don't like very much this one, okay, but it was the only one to go on. We have known also that the digital divide is still a great barrier. We know that. And the president of IAU has mentioned this about the inequality and also about the gender aspects. So we know that. So we need to overcome this situation. Another lesson is that remote teaching was not online education. And the work or the article from Hodge and other colleagues was quite clear in that sense. So some people consider that online didn't work, but what we did is not exactly online. And this is important to take some kind of confidence on what online can provide. And finally, that hybridization of learning is already here. In fact, it was here, but now all of us acknowledge that it's already here. So, and then regarding the situation about online education, I think that we can talk about the tale of the emperor's new clothes, because at the end, it seemed to be that online was not exactly what was expected. And especially that a lot of people and institutions that said, well, we will do it online because we know how to do it, they finally acknowledged that their clothes were not what they expected at the end. We know that online education is a fuzzy concept. We know that. And that its definition sometimes depends on everyone's use. Sometimes traditional distance education using new technologies is considered online education. Sometimes it's called e-learning with a strong technology-based approach. Sometimes implies synchronous and asynchronous solutions, or maybe not. It can be understood as a simple replica of classroom lectures, usually based on video lectures, or as a PDF delivery model, or as an accessible repository of documents. All this sometimes can be understood as online education. So all this leads to considerable confusion for those people who are really interested in it for the first time. So it's important then to clarify what we can understand or what is quality online education. We are not talking only about the access to some kind of information. We are talking about online education. That means a mediation between the access to information and the conversion of this information to make it become knowledge. So the literature, the research is showing that quality online education has to be planned, organized, demanding, and responsible. In other words, or maybe in just one word, strategic. And this is very important. So it's not today I'm a face-to-face institution, tomorrow I will be online, because I just integrated some technology and that's all. This is not working that way. Okay, so it has to be strategic. It has to be a mission and a vision. It has to be developed. It has to have developed a plan for that. If we do that, then this quality online education will allow flexibility, personalization, interaction, and collaboration, as I have mentioned, as the pillars of future learning at the very beginning of that. So in these conditions, this quality online education becomes sustainable, accessible, and also innovative, because we are planning also the reflection about how it worked and how we should make any kind of innovation in order to make it work much better. So the thing is that we should mobilize learning. In our institution, and as Liz did with Deakin University, let me just give you some figures of it. The Open University of Catalonia was created in 1995, so we are just 25, 26 years old, and currently we have over 70,000 students fully online, all of them fully online. And we have also almost 90,000 graduate people from our university. So it means that our experience, even if we started with just 200 students, has grown very much. And this is the model that we used to provide to our students. Considering that in the Spanish arena, only Spanish, not the Spanish-speaking countries, but the Spanish arena, the 15% of the university students are following their studies fully online. No matter undergraduate or postgraduate, this is the enrollment at the only online universities in Spain. It means the 15% of them. So it's quite at the same level as in the US, as in Canada. We are talking about 16, 17%. And I think that in Australia it's a bit much higher. I think it's around 19, 20%. But I think that we are in this quite similar level. So mobilizing learning means to base everything on the student activities, the activities that the student will develop. As my rector have mentioned, we put the student in the very middle, in the very center of our model. And this student activity is based on activity, on participation and engagement, and a continuous assessment that provides us a lot of information about how the students are progressing in their development. We put around them a group of teachers that give them support, guidance, and interaction, especially interaction, because it's not about independent study only. It's about also having interaction between the teachers and the students, and also between the students and themselves. We also provide them a set of learning resources with easy access to content based on multiple formats and with diversified technology. And finally, we also provide the creation of a networked community, a group of peers that they work together, and then providing and fostering collaboration, teamwork, knowledge building, and especially a sense of group. Some of these elements have been mentioned by Professor Johnson before, and I agree, fully agree, on the fact that this will help very much to develop any integrative system in which we take into consideration a part of online and a part on campus experience too. So moving to these hybrid models, first of all, I think that we all share an axiom that it's widely accepted that university has to keep being in presence or in on campus. But some universities have experienced also new approaches for teaching and learning, and some have succeeded. So it's worth to take advantage of this experience in order to provide more flexibility, more capacity of personalization, more disponibility or availability for interaction, and more opportunities for collaboration in the higher education models that any institution is providing to their students. Because even if we come really back to the desired normal, we'll be back to fully in presence models. Personally, I don't think so, or maybe I think that we should not. Sometimes I'm afraid about the pendulum loop, that once you have had to do everything online, the reaction is we are coming back to the full face-to-face because that was the best and we cannot do anything else than that. I hope this won't be the future. because I think that a lot of institutions are moving to hybrid models in higher education. But what does this mean? First, what we should first define what is a hybrid or blended model for us. As Professor Johnson said, there are a variety, a range of opportunities and possibilities. And for instance, it's not exactly the same as Bogan, Cleveland, Hines, and Garrison define on blended learning, or Beatty on high flux models, or Armelini and Padilla as an integrated blended design. Okay, so there are different, but the final function would be the same. Everyone has to decide what is the best that fit, or the one that fits best with their particular vision of the future. But for me, the most important thing is to develop a model that allows swapping in presence and online moments, because this is the normal in our lives. We are moving from in presence moments and online moments, so does learning is too. And this is what I think it's important to develop. The key has to be to get a fluid, smooth transition between in presence moments and online moments. A transition that should not be traumatic, but natural, assumed, known. Most of the tensions and the crisis lived during the pandemic was because we shift from face-to-face to online without knowing where we were going to be and what was going to happen. So most of the traumatic or situations, or plenty of tensions, are because we don't know. So the unexpected is what make us to be afraid about the very next future. So if we can prepare people to this smooth transition, to be able to be used to change these moments, to be in presence, to be online, probably we will avoid any kind of traumatic situation, but natural and assumed and accepted. I would like to spend just a few minutes talking about what are, from our perspective, what are the conditions for a smooth transition in unexpected, or maybe not unexpected, times. The first of all is a hybrid model designed from a different look. And this is coming back to my title of the session, this glancing about a different perspective. Usually, blended or hybrid models are designed from the face-to-face perspective, because it's the one that the institutions know very well, because most of these institutions are face-to-face. Online institutions rarely will move to blended, because the profile of the students are the ones that need the maximum flexibility, not only regarding space, but also time. So the move will be from those institutions that are face-to-face transitioning to a blended situation. So they know what they know before, and they never reach the 100% possibilities or potential of doing things online. So at this stage, I suggest to start designing from a different look, to start designing from an online look, and design the courses fully online, and then at the end, decide what elements will be face-to-face or in presence, because they will add more value. In some extent, it's very similar to what Professor Johnson has mentioned. To think on that and to decide at the same time what will be synchronous and what will be asynchronous, because this is very important. So online doesn't mean to be in front of a screen at the same time as the teacher. It means that we can work together, or we can work in different moments. So synchronously and asynchronously are two ways to work together, but also in group or independently. So these decisions are the decisions that would move our kind of activities in a different way. And thinking about activities is very important, activities or challenges, because it's not about transmitting content, it's about the learning experience of our students. So if we do that, we can have a reverse model in which for any kind of condition, outside condition, we can change our plan because we have prepared everything. Doesn't matter if it will be in presence or it will be online, because we have already designed for both. This is one question. The second condition is dissociating time. In fact, we are also using only one of the natures of time, the way in which we are at the same time with our students. But there is a time for teaching and there is a time for learning. And sometimes it's not exactly the same. When we dissociate these two natures of the time, what we do is to multiply, to expand the opportunities and the possibilities of doing things in different moments. I can't say that doing that I won't have 24 hours, but 48. That's not true, of course. But I will expand my opportunities for learning and for teaching, because I don't need to be at the same time in the same place, because at the end, to be in front of the same screen means to be also at the same place. So working asynchronously, working synchronously, deciding how to manage time in different ways is very important for that. The third element is to recover what I like to say, I like to call the job of learning, the profession of learner. That's very important. So a lot of learners are expecting us to say what they should do. Instead of that, let's give them tools and clues in order to develop their autonomy and to make their self-regulation grow. Because I think that this is very important in that particular setting. The growth of autonomy and self-regulation will make our students much more competent in order to manage, on one hand, the time and the planning of the activities they should do. And finally, and obviously I cannot go deeper because of the time, to have a formative, continuous and diversified assessment. Because I think that in last month, a great concern of most of the institutions were how we will evaluate, how we will assess our students. And the problem was not the assessment, but the learning. And sometimes we lose the focus on that. So the assessment has to be formative, so helping the students and supporting the students to learn, continuous, because then that doesn't matter if in a particular moment we cannot do something or something else, and diversified, because then we can work in different ways of format and methodology and the actors or the agents that are involved in the assessment. So this flexibility gives us a lot of possibilities in order to get the most possible information from the students. So if we have more information and data from the students, we probably will develop a fairer assessment from them, and we will know which is exactly the process and the progress they have been, no matter if they are online, no matter if they are face-to-face. So I'm going to close with a couple of remarks. The first one is the most important thing that we should not do is to replicate in-presence classroom teaching when we are in a blended situation or online. So the important question here is how much have we learned from the pandemic situation? And if the pendulum won't come back to the initial position. This is very important. Probably we need to look for a balanced situation of the pendulum, but this is most important. Do not replicate in-presence classroom teaching strategies, because as you know in the picture, the copy is always worse than the original. Even if we try to do it, it's not the same. Given different contexts, different combination of strategies have to be applied. I would like to finish telling you that we have been as an institution supporting, developing some supporting resources for the institutions and professors that have asked to us about this situation of pandemic since March last year. So we provide first a decalogue of 10 tips for trying to adapt the situation of interruption of education to an online solution. And we also prepare a set of different webinars we called emergency remote teaching. We worked basically in Spanish because we had a lot of requirements from Latin American Spanish-speaking institutions from those countries. And finally, in September, we published a book that is called Decalogue for the Improvement of Online Teaching, that it will be in an English version very soon. So for those people that can read in Spanish, you can easily and freely download the book from here. For those that have to read in English, please just wait for a couple of months that we will have available the same version in English. This was our contribution because we thought that our experience should be shared with a lot of people that were in a critical situation, because we understand that situation. And at the same time, this made us to understand that the future has to be based on further collaboration between those institutions that are face-to-face and those that are online. We should work together as we are doing at this particular moment now in order to improve, in general, the quality and the delivery of higher education all over the world. So this further collaboration has to be a must for all of us. So this is the list of references, and thank you very much for your attention. I will be more than glad to answer any question that you may have.
Thank you very much, Albert, for your presentation. A very interesting overlook as well, and making the linkages between online learning and as well face-to-face. And I think that you highlighted in one of your slides that something that I think that we all believe is important. We still need campus-based education, and I think that also kind of fitted nicely to the slide where, Liz, you showed that many of the undergrad students are those who are the majority in terms of actually attending on-campus education. So I think that there we do have to recognize something that is sometimes an implicit part of universities, that they do play a very important role in society as social communities where you grow, where you exchange with students. That is also part. Universities are beyond the credentials that they actually offer in the end when the students go away. But you also both allude to the fact that we need more flexibility. We need to look at different types of learners who have different needs. And we are in an era of lifelong learning where you would need to continuously reskill or learn new things in order to adapt to a fast changing world. And depending on where you are in your situation or where you're maybe situated, you need this type of flexibility that online education offers. So what I find fascinating in this conversation as well is that I'm actually seeing how more traditional universities and online universities are coming more together and actually blending a bit as well. So I think that it is not one versus the other, but it is an acknowledgement of the fact that we live in a society with digital technologies, as Liz is saying. So we have to prepare our students as well for this world. So thank you, both of us. We still have a few minutes for some questions, and we do have questions in the chat. So I'll try to take a few of them. I don't know if we have the time to go over them all, but at least let us start. I would like to start with you, Liz, and I think that I will put two questions on the table for you. One is thinking about how to encourage this transformation at the university side, because as you said in your presentation, it depends very much on the learning outcomes, on the type of discipline. We have to look at the narrow context, what makes sense, where can we actually more draw on face-to-face because it makes more sense, or where do we actually see it? How, from an organizational point of view, do you put this in place? I mean, you need a global framework, but then enough flexibility at the level. I mean, what is your approach here? And yeah, let's start with that one and we'll come back.
Thanks, Trina. So it's not a trivial undertaking. As Albert says, there's a big difference between emergency remote teaching, the response in the moment, rather than an intentionally designed curriculum. If you're going to embrace this, and I agree with Albert, there is no turning back now. The important thing is to embrace it as an institution. And that means that educators can work in teams, they can work with each other, and you can bring in specialised expertise. So there are decades of good research around what works best in learning and what works best in online learning. So the revolution for us in moving to a digital environment was being able to have learning design expertise available for teaching teams. Now, it's a bottomless pit. However much expertise you provide, the staff will need more. So you need to structure that and make sure that people can learn from each other as well. But there is a great deal of expertise out there. One of the hottest jobs in education in Australia at the moment is the learning designer job, the educational technologist job, where you've got somebody who can help you design in a digital way. And that recognises that all higher education institutions, and I think it's probably global, will use some kind of digital format for at least resources, if not online activities and assessment. So an institutional focus, putting behind some expertise and bringing in experts who can work with teaching teams, and creating communities of practice where people can learn from each other.
Thank you, Liz. And turning to you, Albert, there are several questions as well. And one of them is how to ensure that academic skills such as critical thinking are developed in online education. And another colleague is also asking that in some countries you don't necessarily, you have, let me just find the question from our colleague, online education requires educators to be highly autonomous. I find that the majority of my students are not necessarily autonomous during this year. What can we do in order to develop those skills in students? So two questions over to you.
Sorry, I was muted. So thank you very much for the questions, and thank you, Trina, for moderating them. The way that you can ensure, in this case, critical thinking is the same that you can ensure any other competence you would like to develop or to make your students to acquire. Because the thing is that we should think in the same level, at the same level we are thinking in an in-presence institution, higher education institution. So the main mission of any online program is to make the students get the same level of competencies they can have in another kind of situation. So then you design the whole content, you design the whole courses in order to focus on this perspective. So the direct answer is to designing and putting on the table the kind of activities that will provide the students the necessary training for developing this critical thinking. If you in a face-to-face institution, what you do in order to make this, create this or reach this critical thinking competence is to provide, for instance, a sequence of a video, or maybe to make them read a particular text and then to talk and discuss about it and to ask them with questions about making them to think on that and being critical. This is the same that you can do in an online environment. The only thing is that you will start differently and you will develop strategies differently too, because the context is not the same. And this is the most important thing. So the thing is not to go straight directly to say, okay, so I'm going to explain you the same that I'm doing at the classroom, at the physical classroom, and I tell you that through a screen. It's not that. Maybe it will be written. It will be written based, and they have to read it and to reflect on it, and they have some questions, and step by step they have to answer these questions and go to the following level, and so on. So the thing is that at the end we can achieve the same competencies. It's true that and this has been pointed out by Professor Johnson on the presentation, that depending on the kind of knowledge they have to achieve, sometimes this will be much more difficult, or they will need to have a final application physically of that knowledge. For instance, the example of how a pilot is trained is very important. So it's thousands of hours in a simulator, fully online. But then they have to take a plane and they have to fly and to show that. But when they do that, they know how to do it. So it means that it works, that they have learned previously to do that, and then apply that in another context. So this is the same situation. And related to the how we could make our students more autonomous, well, this is a very good question. It's like the question of what's first, the egg or the hen, okay? Because the most important thing now is to work all together in order to make our students grow in terms of their autonomy and capacity of self-regulation. And this has to be done from the very beginning, even in the early childhood schools, in order to make them more opportunities for develop themselves. And if we have the problem today in our classroom, because it's the first year of the university and I have that students, the thing is to make them and to, let's say, waste some time in order to give them opportunities for make their autonomy to grow. It's important and it's necessary. You can waste some time at the beginning, but at the end, you will retrieve all this work you did with them, because they will be much more able to develop by themselves what you are asking them. The other thing is to let them with a good pattern of things that they should do, but giving some kind of flexibility or freedom in order to introduce their particular perspective. They should not be shy, and they are. And especially they are very comfortable by waiting for what you are going to tell them. Don't tell them. Ask them to look for it. Ask them to browse in the digital networks. Let them ask them for looking for information, and then put all them together in order to identify what they have found out and how you can mediate all the information they get. So it's step by step, you will succeed in providing them more autonomy.
Thank you very much, Albert. I see that we have actually already come to an end in terms of the time. I will give both of our speakers a last chance to provide a final comment. Even though we still have many questions, we have to continue the conversation, and it will take place already tomorrow during our policy dialogue. As it was explained in the beginning of this session, we do hold a policy dialogue as a follow-up to each of the 6 chapters. Unfortunately, the policy dialogues are limited in scope because they're really constructed in order to provide exchanges among the audience. So we do look forward to continuing the conversation for all those who signed up tomorrow. And for all the others, we're happy that you're here, and please do look at the program, the next chapters and the next policy dialogues, and you're welcome to go to the website and sign up there. But before we close, I just want to give a final word to both of our speakers. And we're very pleased. I see very many positive comments in the chat as well. They're very appreciative of your presentation. So thank you very much. Liz, I see there are many questions in the chat coming in on how we can also make the link closer between education and research. Should we do pre-course assessment to better assess what types of tools we can use to students? I will let it up to you to decide what will be your final remarks in this session.
So I think I draw that together, Trina, by pointing to the importance of taking students with you. So student expectations are really critical here. If students come into a course expecting the same kind of environment that they had at school, then they have a larger transition to make. And so I think about the maturity of learning skills. So students who are returning to study may or may not have mature skills, but they need to develop them. So you're helping them to develop the way they interact with each other, with their teachers, with the resources, developing their skills so they become more independent lifelong learners. And that applies to both on-campus students and online students. Don't forget that the world's information is digital. When we interact and connect with our colleagues internationally, we are doing what we ask our students to do digitally, and it is not a foreign territory for us. They can join us in that journey and they can build the skills to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Well, I think that then I will give a word about another aspect that I think it's very important too. And I agree with the first answer to the first question from Liz on the need of an institutional approach. That's important. And then I would like to ask the institutions, please support your teachers. This is very important. They, of course, they need training, but they need also a kind of conviction about what they are doing. They need to feel the support of the institution. And at the very beginning, they will feel an increase of workload. Please manage that. Because if not, you are preparing your teachers in order to say, this doesn't work. And it doesn't work because it's uncomfortable for them, because it's much more work to be done than they did before. And it doesn't mean that it's a bad work. It's probably very good, but they need to feel that this is a very good job and that they did it as expected. So the organization for that is very important. It's not just adding what they did face-to-face, something online. That's not the solution, because you are then increasing the workload of everyone in the organization. So a good organization and a good support for the teachers will probably give the opportunity to the students to live a good experience for learning. And I think that these two elements are strictly linked.
Thank you very much, Albert and Liz, for your final words, and thank you for participating in this highly interesting conversation. And I think that, as you said, Albert, it is about understanding how teaching and learning strategies online are different from face-to-face. This is really key, and that means that, of course, we need to invest time in building those skills. And I think that I also hear very much agreement that we need to continue, of course, face-to-face learning, but we have to think about how we prioritize the time on campus with our students in order to make the most of that time when they are there, and then see, okay, what types of interactions can we actually have beyond the classroom, so that when we are at campus, then we can have the different exchanges, the presentations, things that are very much engaging, and maybe the knowledge transfer that we sometimes see in lectures face to face, maybe that is one part that can be simulated differently using the online space, of course taking into consideration the different disciplines, the learning context, what makes sense. It's not something that can necessarily be applied to all disciplines. So I want to thank you all, and I also saw some questions about assessment, so I am just highlighting here that chapter 2 in our session is going to be about assessment practices in hybrid and online HE scenarios. So this is an opportunity for you to register for that one, and we will again have a colleague, Nati Cabrera from UOC, joining us, and then we will have a colleague from Stockholm University, Henrik Johansson, who will also provide the perspective of their strategies from a campus-based university. So we thank you all for joining us for this first chapter, and look forward to seeing you for the next one. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.